Hello friends, it is finally here. The wait, if you're waiting at all in the first place, is now over. I am starting a book club here in 2025, the Active Mind Book Club over on Patreon, and I couldn't be more stoked to kick this thing off and to share with you the reading schedule that I have planned out for the year. And before I do that, I want to explain real quick why I'm starting a book club in the first place. So beyond the encouragement I've had to start some form of book club or Discord just to make this community feel more interactive, more back and forth, just because sometimes the comment section in the videos, we are able to exchange ideas and to build a bit of a community, but it's not as involved and as personal as I'd like it to be. Just because if you're like me, you don't have a large circle of friends in your immediate sphere or in real life that you can share your pleasure and the joy and the thrill of these novels that you're reading, these books that you're exploring. You don't really have that room and that space and those people to exchange those ideas with. And, YouTube's been a phenomenal place. This community has been so enriching to my life, to my reading experience, to my reading journey. And I've just been dying to find ways to expand that, to expand the horizons of this community and the small little place we have, this little nook or corner we have in the booktube space. And I think the book club is just the perfect step to do that. And specifically what I think the book club will enable us to do is to have a more thorough, extensive, and personal dialogue or discussion about these works, because when you're trying to tackle some very abstruse or intimidating work like The Brothers Karamazov, like Infinite Jest, Jane Eyre, Anna Karenina, these novels have so much in them. They're so tumescent. They have historical context, political ideologies going in them, philosophical themes, these large casts of characters. And although you can, read these on your own and create your own analysis, I think by doing it collectively, by dissecting them together week by week, sharing in these group discussions, seeing what stands out for me, for you, for someone else, and seeing and sharing these different perspectives, we're able to have a much more enriching experience, absorb more from the work, and have a much more heightened sense of community, which I definitely would love to have more in my life. Now, before I get to the reading schedule, I want to say real quick that the book club is going to be self-paced. So there will be clear start and end points for reading specific books, but I understand that things pop up. People read at different paces. Maybe you're ahead of the club, maybe you're a little bit behind. And so I want to allow a lot more flexibility and freedom within the club. But I think that'll make for the best experience. It'll make for better discussions. And if you are falling behind, you can always go back to older posts, return to the different discussions, the in-depth analysis and videos I upload as well, and look at those later on if you fall behind, and then you can kind of catch up or pick and choose however you want to read within the book club. The first work we'll be reading throughout the months of January and February is the renowned Russian epic War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. This book is likely the most famous Russian novel ever written, and I've loved everything I've read from Tolstoy so far, so my enthusiasm and excitement for this work is sky high. Like any great Russian novel, there are all these overlapping components to it. It's set during the Napoleonic Wars. You also have the backdrop of 19th century Russian society. You have these philosophical themes of power and war, fate, spirituality, individuality, all these different components as well. And I think exploring it together will be the best way to try and untangle and fully grasp the intertwining storylines and all the context that underlies this whole novel. So very excited to kick off the year with this book. I feel like it's the best way to start off the book club. Next, in the month of March, we're going to be reading two books, the first of which being a book, an author, and a literary period that I'll be going in blind towards, and that is The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. I've yet to read any Faulkner. I haven't really read any modernist literature, with maybe a few exceptions. And I'm curious to see what I make of this book and the writing style, because it is a non-linear timeline broken up into 4 different parts. And because it's written in the South, because it's Faulkner, there's going to have, it's going to have racial tensions, Southern history, but a lot of the novel deals with time and one's identity and the passing of time. So I suspect it'll be a book that I really need to dial in and focus on those intricacies, follow the chronological timeline that's being slowly unraveled and presented to me. So I think it'll be a very fun, shorter work to read after a long book like War and Peace. Now, I mentioned there'll be 2 books in the month of March. Now, one thing that I plan to do within the book club is have a few opportunities and open periods throughout the year that I can have club picks. So that'll be a very fun opportunity where the club can vote on which book we're reading, on which book we'll be reading throughout the month. So we'll finish this book in March, but we'll also be reading a short book. Within that, I'll break it down in a moment what the club picks will look like, but it'll be another short work that's chosen by the club. The next book that we'll be reading through the months of April and May is a book that I've been dying to dig into, and I have heard nothing but praise for this author, and that is The Recognitions by William Gaddis. Now, with that said, I've also heard, and when I've seen it in stores, it is a chunker. It is a sprawling, multi-layered, complex prose, just dense piece of work. And I'm nervous to not fully grasp it. I guess you can't fully grasp everything on a first read, but I think it will be a difficult challenge for all of us involved in the club to read this book, but a very rewarding book as well. I've heard only great things about not only The Recognitions, but JR as well. So Gaddis has just been a name I've been waiting and waiting to leap into and just share and understand the admiration for Gaddis. So that'll be the massive book that we'll be reading throughout the months of April and May. Then in the month of June, we're going to be reading a book that originally I wasn't that excited about until recently I mentioned it in a video, and I saw nothing but comment after comment after comment praising the book, stating that it's, one of the best books they've ever read, and that is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Now, with that said, I know a lot of you, I think, have already read this book, so hopefully it's not too hard of a sell to get you to read it again in the club. But of course, this is the story of Captain Ahab trying to kill that daggone white whale, Moby Dick. But of course, that's just the surface level. There's a lot more going on in this novel, and my enthusiasm, like I said, was quite low about this book. I was expecting it to be quite laborsome. But then after reading all those comments from you all and the encouragement about this book, now I'm stoked. I couldn't be more excited to read this book. So that'll be what we'll be sharing and discussing throughout the month of June. Switching gears into July, we're going to be reading two shorter works. The first of which being Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. Ever since I read Beloved, I knew I needed to read more of Morrison's work. The story was just so harrowing, so emotionally raw, and it was really one that paid dividends. And just as it unfolded, the further you read throughout the novel, the more just endearing and painful, but insightful and enlightening it was by the end of the book. And I suspect Song of Solomon will be much of the same. So we'll be reading Song of Solomon, but we'll also be reading another club pick, which, like I said, I'll explain how that works in a moment. Heading into the months of August and September, the next novel that we'll be reading is The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I haven't read too much literature beyond Gundergrass and The Tin Drum, but from what I hear, it seems like Thomas Mann is one of the greatest German fiction writers to ever do it, so I'm very intrigued to see what I make of this novel. It's set right before World War I, so heading into the 20th century, which is a very interesting point in history because you have the industrialization of Western Europe. You have obviously these ideologies and this tension leading into the First World War. And the novel has a lot of symbolism. It has those themes of temporality, of questioning man's existence, of the human condition. So very fascinated to read more of Thomas Mann. I have two of his books on my shelf. Dr. Faustus is the other one. So excited to see what I make of The Magic Mountain and Thomas Mann's writing overall. Moving into the fall in the months of October and November, we have to read a Dostoevsky novel. And my choice is Demons by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Also translated as The Possessed, known as Besi in Russian. I would say probably, not even probably, I'll say it adamantly, this is Dostoevsky's most psychologically complex novel. Now, don't get me wrong, The Brothers Karamazov, Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, all great novels, but Demons, I think, gets forgotten because of how esoteric and perplexing not only the story, but the characters are. And I think by rereading it for me and reading it together, we'll be able to really pick out and do a little bit of psychosis or a little bit more of a psychological exploration into these characters and really get to the bottom of them, because they are very fascinating, whether it's Stavrogan, whether it's Stepan, or the other characters within here, because there's, and beyond the characters, there's political fomentation at the time, there's the historical relevance and period, and there's the actual real events that tie into the novel that inspired it in the first place. So I think this will be a very fun work to pick out all the different components and composite features that make up this novel, and maybe even discuss some of the translation that went into this. So that'll be the pick. I think Dostoevsky's just a good fall and winter read. So that'll be what we'll be reading through October and November. And lastly, in December, we're going to be reading another club pick. Now, what are these club picks? So by being a member in the book club, you're going to have voting power. And this is where we're going to do basically a 2-round system, where a couple weeks before the month that we're going to be reading the club pick, I'm going to be fielding different suggestions. So I'll throw out one or two. It might be something like White Noise by Don DeLillo, or something like To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I'll throw out some options, but really I'm going to be fielding a bunch of suggestions from the comments that you all leave. So whether you comment, whether you like different comments or suggestions from other people, I'll be gathering those and sorting them together to create a poll that I'll be doing the week after, and then we'll have a final vote and choose the club pick. So it's kind of like a 2-round system, gathering your suggestions, formulating a poll, and then us voting to finalize that pick for the month. Now, speaking of voting power and club picks, that leads me into the different tiers for the club. Now, I want to say right off the bat that there is a free option. So if you're looking to just follow along the reading schedule, read the same books along with us, and see a few of the different reading updates and discussions and topics that I bring up, you will have access to some of those. But obviously, if you're looking for a more personal and involved opportunity to really engage with the group, then you're going to want to look to upgrade to the different tiers. Now, the first tier is the Bulgakov tier, and this gives you full access to the weekly discussions I'll be dropping there on Patreon. And I really want to make these far more stimulating than just mundane reading updates on what chapters I've read and what I think about the characters or the plot. I want to make them far more interactive, more open-ended and thought-provoking. So that might mean let's discuss some of the translation in War and Peace, or let's discuss the historical context built around the setting in Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, or the historical context of the South, or legislation in Song of Solomon. These different aspects that bleed into the novel, or maybe it's an event in the author's life that was later put into the work or inspired a certain character. I think this will make for much livelier discussion, fun debate, fun, back and forth amongst all of us in the group. Then, of course, as I mentioned, you'll have voting power, so you can make your voice heard, suggest a book in the club, and likely we'll be reading it. And then lastly, the benefit of this tier is you'll have early access to my full, in-depth, detailed analysis of the book. So at the end of each book that we read, I'll be dropping a thorough video discussing the themes, breaking it down, dissecting, and referencing a lot that we discuss within those weekly discussions. Next is the Dostoevsky tier, and this has all the same perks and benefits as the last tier, but with the addition of bi-weekly videos that I'll be uploading that are more raw or minimally edited. And I'm not only going to be sharing in those videos additional thoughts on the works that we're reading together, but also sharing other insights or reflections I have on other books I'm reading at the time. So even if you're not joining the club to read every single book on the reading schedule, if you're just looking for more content from me, that's going to be the place to go. So like I said, these will be bi-weekly videos where I'm, essentially vlogging and sharing notes, thoughts from other works that I'm reading at the time. And lastly, for those in this tier, I'm going to be doing a live stream at the end of each book that we read, and that'll be a fun opportunity for us to hop on Zoom together, chit chat about the book. I can hear your thoughts directly, and I think it'll make for a really fun conversation. And then the last tier I have, there's no added benefit, but if you're just looking to support me, the channel, the work I do, not only on YouTube, but also on Substack, there is the Pushkin tier as well. It's just a little bit of extra that will go towards the channel. Now, I know what you're thinking. Brock, why am I going to join the book club now if the reading schedule doesn't start until December? Good question. I'm going to be reading 4 books throughout the month of December, although it might bleed into January. I'm going to be reading this quartet from László Krasznahorkai, and I'm going to be uploading 3, maybe even 4 vlogs throughout the month of December, dissecting, discussing, and sharing my thoughts on these melancholic, disturbing, and strange books. Krasznahorkai is an author I've been meaning to get to. I keep hearing more and more about him. He just had another novel translated into English and published here, I think last month. And One of you mentioned him to me in the past, but what really pushed me over the edge was I was planning to read Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman throughout December. I think I even posted this on the community tab here on YouTube. But Ruben over at To Readers It May Concern nudged me and said, hey, you should read the Quartet by Krasznahorkai. So that's where I'm doing now. So you can blame him, but I'm very excited to read this author because it seems, from what I hear, it seems like his writing style, his prose, his tone, these types of novels are right up my alley. So couldn't be more stoked to dig into these throughout December. I think it'll be a fun way to lead into the new year and lead into the book club. So if you're looking for some content leading into the book club, that'll be the place to do it. So you can join now. I'll link the club in the description. No pressure to join, obviously, at all. But if you are looking to hear more about Krasznahorkai, if you are curious, that will be where that exclusive content is uploaded over at. So with all that said, so grateful for this community on YouTube. And like I said, this is just an attempt for me to extend that involvement, engage with you all much further, share the experience of reading these very complex, labyrinthine novels together. And I think it'll just make for a very, very fun 2025. So if you have any questions at all about the club, about the books, leave it in the comments down below, or you can always email me. That's in the description as well. Email, message, whatever. I'm always grateful and excited to hear from you all. So like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more content, and I'll see you all in the next one.